the Utilmate Better Bills webinar. We'll now get started into this. All right, firstly, on the video screen you can see here, obviously I'm Mike from Utilmate. We've also got Pritesh from Compliance Quarter joining us as well. So Pritesh, at the end of this, after I've been through this presentation, he can answer any technical questions you may have. Okay, so let's kick this off. So what is Better Bills? So I'm sure everyone on this call has got some sort of awareness of it, but it's essentially a drive by the AER, a new set of regulations to make your energy bills a little bit more understandable and customer friendly, right? So that's, I suppose, the overall goal of where this thing's come from. It is to be implemented, so all your bills have to comply with the Better Bills standards on the 30th of September this year. So that gives us a good few months to get this sorted. It affects all electricity and gas retailers or bills for authorized retailers. So at the moment, as we understand it, it's authorized retailers only. So if you're operating under some exemption, then potentially you don't need to do this, but that may be a short-lived period because they may introduce it there as well. So you have to make a decision for your business whether you adopt this now or not or whatever. So it's all customers in the NECF framework, which is obviously New South Wales, Queensland, SA and ACT. So VIC is excluded here from the requirements. What we would say though is obviously we have a bunch of customers that operate in multiple states, including VIC and New South Wales. It's always a bit tricky to have two different bills or formats going out both for your customers and for you guys when you're providing support and answering questions for customers. So just something to consider as well. The things that are changing, or the key bits that they're trying to do here, is they're trying to make the language nice and simple, no jargon, acronyms, technical terms. So they've been a lot more prescribed about the sort of terminology you have to use on your bills. Again, making it easy to understand. They've got some requirements and thoughts around things like even as far as fonts, colors, sizes, things like that, lots of white space. They have defined information on the bill as either tier 1 or tier 2. Tier 1 go on a paginated bill, which is what we produce. So paginated just means multiple pages. So we produce what they deem as paginated bills. Now they have tier 1 and tier 2 information. Tier 1 goes on the front of the bill. Tier 2 can go on the back of the bill. As simple as that. So they prescribe what they deem to be tier 1 and tier 2. And yeah, so that's sort of the main bits there. Now getting into the information, so I won't go through all of these points in detail. I mean, the main ones to call out here is the NEMI. So you can see here they're talking about a NEMI being on the front of the bill. So traditionally and typically we put those on the back of the bill. They have to go on the front. Equally, an address for supply. Again, they wanted that as tier 1 information, so it needs to go on the front of the bill. Now the challenge around that is obviously for those to produce multi-site bills or consolidated bills. You know, what do we do there? And we've got some solutions that we've come up with there. So that's sort of the main bits here. The rest of it's fairly self-explanatory information. The next bit here is your tier 2 information. So this is obviously stuff that goes on the back of the bill. We've got some examples further down that we're going to show you. The key parts here is they've got a plan summary. So they want sort of a nice summary of the plan that a customer is on the second page of the bill. They don't like, as I said before, acronyms. So the words E and A for estimate and actual need to disappear, and they want the full words on there. GST inclusive. So Victoria already had a requirement for GST inclusive, and a lot of you guys have adopted GST inclusive rates for residential customers already. So it's not a requirement, but it's a good idea, we believe, because if you're operating in multiple states, it's nice. It's very easy to get confused if you have both GST exclusive rates and inclusive rates shown on your bills, depending on what state the customer's in. And then there's a whole bunch of messages that they want on the bills as well, which I'll take you through shortly as well. And the other one that's quite interesting is the timing of meters. So if you're offering peak off-peak pricing or tariffs, things like that, they want you to show, you know, what is peak, what is off-peak, which is new as well. So that's some of the tier 2 information, and then we've sort of got some more information here about what the tier 2 information is. So stepping into some examples, right? So the process we've been through over the last probably four months plus now with Pratish and the guys at Compliance Quarter is we have produced a range of ZAPI or template bills for a bunch of scenarios. So, first bills, final bills, on direct debit, not on direct debit, unbundled, bundled, overdue balances, not overdue balances, a whole bunch of things like that. And the guys have reviewed them against the Better Bills standards, and they'll come back to us with comments, and we've gone back and forth a few times, and we've come up with these templates, which we believe are compliant templates as far as the Better Bills standard goes. So that's what you're looking at right now in front of you. What you'll notice for some of you that they are fairly different from your current invoices. So there is a fair bit of difference. For some of you, they're probably a bit closer, but a lot of you guys, your templates haven't been touched for many years, and so these are a bit of an upgrade and an update. So some of the things just to point out, as I mentioned before, is site identifier we've got sitting here. Typically it's on the back of the bill, so we've brought that forward onto the front. Address for supply, as I said, is only required if it's different to the postal address we're showing here. So again, we're bringing that forward in that case. The other bit here that's quite a big change or new is this. It's almost like a best offer type stuff. So best offer is something that's existed in Victoria for some time, which is basically you're meant to compare your plans or the plan the customer's on to the Victorian default offer. So that's been around a fair while, but in the other states, there's been no requirement to do that. Now, as part of the Better Bills standard, they are introducing this, could you save money on another plan type concept. Now, the difference is that you're only comparing against other plans available to the customer. So you don't have to compare it to the New South Wales DFO, the default offer. You just compare it to other plans that are available to that customer. So in most cases, if you're in an embedded network for a lot of our customers where they only have one plan available, typically, right? That's quite often the case. So most of the time you're going to be saying, well, there are no other plans available, so you are therefore on the best plan available to you, right? So that's just, but it does have to go on the bill regardless. So and in the situation where they do have options or multiple plans available to them, then obviously we've got a process happening which can do that comparison and work out based on their usage, are they on the best plan available to them? Okay, so that is quite a decent change. The Energy Made Easy website has to have a reference on as a tier 1 piece of information, so on the front of the bill. So, sorry, as far as the payment slip goes, all they've really suggested is the use of symbols, links to online payment options, all pretty intuitive stuff, really. So, we've just introduced some new icons there, but largely the payment slip hasn't changed. One thing that we've put in red here that we'd like to call out is, as you notice in the requirements, it says, you need to use the words National Metering Identifier, or NEMI as it's known. So you actually have to use the words National Metering Identifier. Now, and that's fine if you're an on-market retailer and the identifier exists in MSATs, but for a lot of you guys that are doing embedded networks, obviously it's not a NEMI as far as the market's concerned. So we've chosen here to call it site identifier. Now, Pratish might give us some more thoughts on this at the end, but we don't believe you can call it a NEMI because again, you can't search it in MSAT. It is not a NEMI. So we're calling it site identifier, but this is something that you may have to work through with the regulator, and get an exemption or work out what you want to do in that respect. So we believe calling it a site identifier is a more accurate and realistic representation. But yeah, the actual rules say you need to call it a national metering identifier. That's a tricky one. The next bit is the tier 2 information. So again, some of the key bits here that I want to call out is you've got this plan summary at the top, which is new. And this is really what in our system, what we're calling an offering. So on the offering, we're going to put some plan description. And as you can see in the example here, it'll talk about a direct debit discount. It can talk about green energy. It can talk about whatever you want, but it's a summary of the plan they're on. It doesn't need to include the rates, but it's a summary of the plan. The other things here are like things like this wording, understand your bill. Well, that's actually a prescribed piece of some words that exist or need to happen on the bill. So it's not just something we've come up with. the Better Bills Guideline say they want the words understand your bill. Again, using the word bill instead of invoice, they want them called bills. So, just they're very prescriptive. Same as this, your charges are based on an actual meter reading. It's a prescribed piece of wording that they want on the bills. So in general, you'll find there's a lot more rules, a lot more requirements around what they want you to show. As I mentioned before, we've got the words estimate and actual rather than A and E with a little thing that points to what A and E means. That is, they want the full words, they don't want acronyms. Also under 9 here, what I mentioned before, you have to show the timings for your metering, for your charges. So if you can't just say anytime, you can't just say peak, off peak or whatever. You actually have to say, what is my peak, what is my off peak? Right, so those are sort of the main things here. I mean, this presentation will come through to everyone after this webinar, and we'll send it all through to you so you can fully digest it. But those are some of the main bits that we need to call out here. Now, an estimated bill. So, as I said, that example before was an actual bill. So this is an example of an estimated bill. So it says, your charges are based on an estimation of your usage. So, and again, we can't call it E, we have to call it an estimate, and we have to give them a statement about how they actually give you a reading. So you'll notice further down on those bills, they actually have, a description about what the estimate means and what you can do about it. They have introduced a concept of additional information. So if you want to provide tier 3 or additional information or put additional information on your bill, you have to submit those to the AER for approval. And again, I'll get Pritesh to talk about that process a bit, and how that might need to work. The invoice messages. So these are the invoice messages that will be given to you out of the box as part of Better Bills. So what you can see here is you got, page 1, page 2. Some are only for New South Wales or estimated bills, etc. But these are the messages that will be shown on the bills. Now, go into more detail on the better offer messages. So that's that bit on the front page of the bill that we talked about. So you have to show one of 2 messages, right? You have to say you are on the best plan, which is the second one here, or you could save money by going to another plan, right? So this, we've just talked about it in here a little bit. The wording itself is this is exact wording. It's prescribed. It's not something we've come up with. So they wants you to say these words on the message, right? So again, even the words, the Australian Energy Regulator requires us to include this information, are words they want you to put on your bill, right? So the words are very prescribed about what you want to do. And as I mentioned before, it's just comparing to other plans available to that customer. So if you guys recall, in our system, we obviously have a concept of a building, and then we have one or many price plans available in that building. So it's only if you have more than one price plan available do we actually do any comparison. Otherwise, we're just saying you're on the best offer already because you've only got one price plan. If you got questions as I'm speaking, just chuck them in the chat here, and we'll pick them up at the end. So the next bit here is around the supply address. So I mentioned before that we may have to put the supply address on the front of the bill. So this is all automated as part of the template, but it's if the supply address is different to the mailing address. So in the case where it's the same, obviously, as you can see in that top example, we don't have to show it, just save some real estate on the front of the bill. In the case where it's different, you can see here we've got supply address shown in the supply address here. Historically, we've shown this on the second page of the bill in all cases, but yeah, it's now deemed to be a tier 1 piece of information, so it needs to go on the front. And the last one here is that in the case where you have multiple sites that you're billing for, right? So a lot of you guys do consolidated billing. It might be you've got power, water at the same property. It could be different addresses, things like that. There's lots of different scenarios, and I don't believe when they were considering the Better Bills requirements, it wasn't probably well considered as the consolidated bills or the multi-site bills. So things like site identifier and the supply address, it could be different if you've got consolidated bills. So in that case, we're just saying refer next page, which is we think the best way to handle that, because it is going to exist. The next one here is just around the site identifier. So it's the same situation. If you've got a consolidated bill, you could have two site identifiers, right? So in that case, we're just doing the same thing. Please refer next page, sorry. So for that same reason. And then again, just coming back to the payment slip. So I mean, the key bit here is we're not planning, or there'll be no changes to the payment slips that are available to you, or that you currently have on your bill. So if you're doing BPay, direct debit, and one other, that will still exist. There's no changes there. We're just printing up some of the icons and conforming to some of their standards here. All right. So the next steps, right? So from our perspective, so you as a business need to decide, yes, I need to adopt these Better Bills standards, right? And then, if you're an authorized retailer, the decision's sort of made for you. If you're an exempt seller, you could choose to do it as, preparing yourself for the future, or you could say we've got enough on our plate and I won't do it just yet. But if you say, yes, we need to do it, we have to do it, all right? So the steps you'll need to take from here is we'd ask you to raise a support ticket through to us and say, hey, we would like to go to the Better Bills standard. As a result of that, we will send you back a few different, we will update your, create a new Better Bills template for you. We will send you a few samples back with a few different scenarios, and that'll have all your brand, payment options, and colors and everything on it. Okay, so from there, we will also alert you in your current templates. So some of you have, historical or some rules that we've built up over time in your templates. So because it's a new template, anything in your current template, will be lost because we're moving to a new template as part of this. So we will alert you to any important conditions or rules that you've built into your current template that are going to be lost, and then you can make a decision about whether you need to keep them or whether they're legacy anyway and they are not needed. But we'll alert you to the fact that you've got some rules in your templates that are going to be lost. So from there, you need to review the Better Bills invoice that we have given you. Now, at this point, we believe this is a compliant template, right? But that doesn't mean that you want to tweak it or alter it to meet your business and your requirements and your brand standards and all sorts of things. So, and that's fine. So if we do need to update it at that point, you need to just give us a set of requirements or how you want it tweaked, and we'll do some costing for you around that. So that part won't be free, but there will be legitimate cases where you do want to make it look a bit different and do a few things. Then you'll need to notify. So if you want to begin seeing these prior to the 30th of September, you need to notify the AER, right? Otherwise, we will liven these on the 30th of September, right? Now, Pratish will talk a bit more about the process shortly, but we understand you do need to apply or submit these to the AER for approval. So I won't talk too much about that because again, Pratish will cover that off for us a bit. But yeah, you need to get it all approved either by your internal compliance people or your external compliance people, or the AER or the AER. And then obviously just need to confirm to us when it's ready to go and we will liven it. Right, so that's more or less the process. So just to recap, it is a new invoice template. Your existing invoice template will cease. We will give you some samples to review. We'll tell you about any custom rules or anything else that you've got sitting in your existing templates that will be lost, and then you need to make a decision on them. And you've also got the choice to do some, marketing or use your new Better Bills template up to suit your business as well. So you got that opportunity as well. It will be just that last note on the slide. It's going to be probably a busy period for us doing this, and obviously yourselves reviewing it and doing all that sort of side of things as well. So I'd just say let's not leave it till the last minute. Otherwise, it'll just give us less time for review and submission to the AER and everything needs to happen. So the earlier we can get this done, the better will be for everyone. So that's really the slideshow I had to go through. As I mentioned before, we've got, these are the samples that we went through with Compliance Quarter. So, we had a whole bunch, this is one that's one of the samples here. Got a whole bunch of them with different timings. We've got rate changes, a whole bunch of the different ones here. Right, so again, we're going to send you some of these through in a sort of a webinar pack as a result of this, so you can review some of these things. The other part that we had here, so again, we've got a report that we're happy to share with you if you want to see, but this is Compliance Quarter reviewing the bills we went through, and we went through a series of iterations. So we're happy, nothing hidden here. We're happy to show you any of that sort of stuff, and ultimately we, a letter from the compliance quarter guys summarising, the process and what we went through. So yeah, really, that's everything I had to go through. So I suppose, Tish, I can hand over to you at this point. And really the question I'd like to ask you first is, can you just explain in a lot better detail than I just did, the process that retailers have to go through with the AR to get this thing live?
So if retailers want to actually start adopting the new bill template before the 30th of September, yes, there's a process that you need to actually go through where you have to submit you have to submit what you're going to do and when you're going to start implementing it. It's the AER's email is in the Better Bill Guideline, which is AER compliance@aer.gov.au. And then the AER usually will come back to you as soon as possible. But contacting them over the phone is not a good idea. I would definitely ask you to send an email so they can respond to you. If you do want to include any additional information which you think is necessary to be included in your Tier 1 or your Tier 2 information, yes, you can reach out to the AER for that as well. But again, you are required to tell them what you're going to include there, what is the relevance of that information for those customers, and additional information that they may need. So from my perspective, that is the process. In terms of what their response would be, it depends. Sometimes they may accept it, sometimes they may not. The change that you were previously talking about, requesting the site identifier instead of the national metering identifier, I think that's a bit more of a common sense change, and I think the AER wouldn't have an issue with something like that. They would usually say, yep, that's fine, because from a customer comprehension perspective, site identifier is what they know and it's what's relevant for them, because those meters or those sites aren't registered on MSATs. So when you do put forward a proposal to call something like a site identifier, explain to them why you want to do it, explain to them the customer impacts. Don't focus so much on the commercial impacts because they're not so interested in rules and regulations of a customer betterment. So focus around the customer impacts, which is comprehension and creating a level of confusion within customers. So that's my recommendation around when you're reaching out to the regulators, focus everything around customer comprehension and customer communication.
Yeah, great, thank you. And there's a couple of other questions that have come in here as well, Pritesh. One about the better offer message. Is it relevant for small business customers as well as residential customers?
Yes, and better offer is applicable to any customer, provided they are below the consumption threshold. So, for example, in New South Wales, Queensland, and South Australia, it's 100 megawatts. And ACT is 100 megawatts. And in South Australia, it's 160 megawatts. So any customer of yours whose annual consumption is above that, then not required. But if it's below that, then you are required to present a positive, which is you are on the best offer, a negative, which is you do have a better offer. So you're required to present it to both type of customers.
Yeah, no, that's great. And just another question that's come in here. Can we also put additional information after the Tier 2 information? So I imagine this is where they're talking about the Tier 3 information. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, the rules do allow you. But the only thing that you would need to consider once you do put that, make sure the font size, the relevance of the information doesn't empower the Tier 1 or the Tier 2 information. So make sure the font size is less than Tier 2 and Tier 1 information. So because they want customers to focus on Tier 1 and 2 information rather than additional information. So you are allowed to put additional information after Tier 1 and Tier 2. Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. And the next one here is probably one I can take, but it's mentioning one price plan per building. Yes, and it is per customer type. So in most of your buildings, you'll have, this is our price plan for residential customers, and you might have some shops in the bottom, but obviously they don't get the same price plan as the residential customers. So when we do the comparison, we're not comparing the shop price plan with the one in the building. We are just saying of the price plans for residential customers, let's do the comparison, and the same below, right? So it's not, we're not crossing between residential and commercial business there. Yep. And one more here. So we've talked about the site identifiers versus NIMIs, and then they're also asking, in the AER's latest information on Better Bills, they went into a fair detail on their reasons on knocking back Tier 1 info requests. So I imagine there are, Do you know anything about that, Pratish?
The Better Bill Guideline version 2, there were a couple of retailers who did put forward some recommendations, and they have pushed some of those, such as one of the retailers have requested metering information to be included as Tier 1, and they've knocked it back by saying, no, we don't believe it's important to be placed there. You can include that in additional information. Osgrid, I believe, was talking about network-related tariffs at cost. The AER has said that, no, we don't believe that's important. That goes in the additional information. So there are about 4 or 5 items that they have knocked back. We are going to be writing an article explaining the different, providing a summary of the Better Bill Guideline version 2. That's going to be published on our website shortly, and you can refer to that article because it outlines exactly what the discussion was and exactly what the AER has deemed to be sitting in additional information.
Yeah. And just another question, I suppose, from me is, so obviously this is for authorized retailers at the moment. If you were sitting here today as an exempt retailer, would you be looking at doing this, or what do you think? What's coming down the pipe at us here?
Sure. So at this stage, there hasn't been any indication that I can actually see where the AER has said that they're going to make changes to the content of bill requirements under the Retail Pricing Information Guideline. Sorry, the Retail Exempt Seller Guideline. However, the AER is looking at reviewing and making some changes to the Exempt Seller Guideline. As a business, you would need to take an informed decision whether it's a commercial against compliance need. What you would want to see is compare the two obligations, compare the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 obligations against the obligations that currently sit in the Exempt Seller Guideline, and try to identify information that you're already presenting and information that you aren't already presenting, because after that gap analysis, you will come out and be like, okay, there's not really much. Maybe we have to increase the font size. Maybe we have to put it in a box similar to what Mike just showed you earlier. Maybe you have to increase the white space around it. And from a customer comprehension perspective, you might say, you know what, I like it. I'm going to go ahead and make that change. So first, do a gap analysis of the obligation. Identify what you really need to change. And once you've done that, make an informed decision from your customer's perspective, from a commercial need, and then from a compliance perspective, whether you want to take a proactive step or do you want to be reactive. If the call was with me from a compliance perspective, I would definitely encourage a proactive approach rather than a reactive one.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. We've got one question here. I'm not sure I quite understand it. So it says, can we display energy charges section in page 2 for an unpaginated bill?
Energy charges. I'll have to take that one on notice. We can respond to you via email separately for that.
Okay. No, that's great. Yeah, thank you. And I suppose just lastly, Pratish, thank you for your time in coming along and for the assistance you've provided us over the last few months and getting to this point. I mean, if anyone wants to reach out to you to engage your and compliance quarter services, you've got you can see the email and phone number and everything on the screen in front of you. Yeah, thank you, Pratish.
No worries. Thank you.
Good one. Okay, well, we're about out of time there, so we'll wind it up. So this recording will go to everyone that's attended the webinar, plus people that were on the distribution list, as well as the presentation you saw and some invoice samples, etc. So good luck to everyone with a busy little period ahead. Switching over to Better Bills. Thanks a lot and have a good afternoon.